Let's jump right into this explainer and look at a legendary city. I mean, we're talking about walls wide enough to actually race chariots on, and gardens that supposedly reached right up into the sky. Yeah, we're talking about Babylon. Imagine a place that essentially ruled the known world, completely shaped our modern ideas of law and science, and stood as the ultimate symbol of power for literally thousands of years. It's one of those cities that just lives rent-free in our collective imagination, right? But the actual reality of how it operated, how it innovated, is honestly even more fascinating than the myths.
But here's the thing. The really interesting question we have to answer is, how did a relatively small, kind of unimportant settlement in modern-day Iraq become the absolute most powerful city of its age, only to just completely disappear beneath the sand? I mean, how does an empire that foundational just vanish into thin air? Well, to figure that out, we've got to start at the very beginning.
Chapter 1: Rise from the Rivers.
Let's travel back roughly 4,000 years to see how Babylon was literally born out of the mud and water of early civilization. To really get Babylon, you have to understand its incredibly lucrative real estate. Mesopotamia, which literally translates to the land between rivers, was sitting right between the Tigris and Euphrates. Thousands of years ago, the flood plans of these two rivers created the absolute perfect conditions for farming, and this insanely fertile environment allowed agriculture to just boom, which in turn gave rise to the earliest massive cities, places like Uruk, and Eridu. These were the absolute powerhouses that invented writing, developed math, and built the world's first large-scale governments. When Babylon first popped up in this bustling landscape 4,000 years ago, it was actually really small. It was completely overshadowed by these older, massive neighbors. But, as we'll see, one ruler was about to change all of that.
Chapter 2: Hammurabi's Code of Law.
So Babylon started small, but right around 1792 BCE, King Hammurabi takes the throne, and he united a huge chunk of Mesopotamia through this absolute masterclass in military skill, diplomacy, and a totally brilliant new framework for society. While he was for sure a great conqueror, his true genius was actually in administration. His greatest legacy, hands down, was creating an incredibly detailed legal system containing nearly 300 laws. This wasn't just some basic list of rules, you know? It was a comprehensive guide to civilization. We're talking trade, property disputes, marriage, crime, labor. He essentially standardized daily life across a massive, super diverse empire.
This brilliantly illustrates the duality of Hammurabi's code. On one hand, you have the famous, and let's be honest, undeniably harsh concept of an eye for an eye. The punishments could be incredibly brutal. But the revolutionary principle here, the real game changer, was that justice should be written down and visible to absolutely everyone. Before this, you were pretty much subjected to the arbitrary whims of whoever happened to be in charge. Hammurabi's code represented a massive leap forward for humanity, because by writing justice down, everyone, even the rulers themselves, could theoretically be held accountable to a standard set of rules. And that shift, that transformed Babylon into the administrative center of the ancient world.
Chapter 3: A City of Wonder.
Fast forward a few centuries, and the city has transformed into this massive economic powerhouse and one of the largest urban centers on Earth. Just picture approaching this ancient metropolis and coming face to face with the breathtaking Ishtar Gate. This wasn't just a door. It was this imposing, towering entrance completely covered in brilliant blue glazed bricks that would have absolutely blinded you shining in the desert sun. It was intricately decorated with these amazing images of dragons, lions, and bulls representing Babylon's gods and royal authority. Just imagine walking through that gate, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of merchants who had traveled from distant lands carrying gold, spices, textiles, opening up to these grand avenues, massive temples, and incredible centers of learning. And Babylon wasn't just incredibly wealthy, it was a total hub of intense scientific inquiry. Their scholars studied astronomy, tracked planetary movements with amazing accuracy, and get this, they revolved their math entirely around the number 60. Here's a mind-blowing connection to the present. The very fact that our modern hour is divided into 60 minutes and a minute into 60 seconds, that traces directly back to these Mesopotamian mathematicians. Literally every single time you check your watch, you are utilizing Babylonian innovation. How crazy is that?
Chapter 4: The Hanging Gardens Mystery.
Now let's dig into history's great unsolved mystery. We're talking about a site so spectacular it was considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Hanging Gardens. According to ancient writers, King Nebuchadnezzar II built these incredible terraces for his queen. The story goes that she was incredibly homesick and desperately missed the lush green mountains of her homeland.
So what does the king do? He orders this massive artificial mountain of greenery to be built right in the middle of the desert cityscape, complete with exotic plants, large trees, and these crazy complex flowing water systems. But here is where the story gets really fascinating. Did they actually exist? You see, despite centuries of rigorous excavation, archaeologists have never found definitive physical evidence of the Hanging Gardens in Babylon itself. None. Which leaves historians constantly debating, were the ancient writers just exaggerating a rather nice palace garden? Was the whole thing entirely made up? Or, as some historians now theorize, were these magnificent gardens actually built in a completely different Mesopotamian city, like Nineveh? To this day, the truth remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries.
Chapter 5. Nebuchadnezzar's Empire.
Mystery aside, King Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled from 605 to 562 BCE, brought Babylon to the absolute peak of its imperial greatness. He made it the undisputed dominant force in the Near East. He rapidly expanded the empire through aggressive military campaigns, but he was also a massive builder. He rebuilt the city's temples, thickened those famously impenetrable city walls, and essentially turned the city into a giant monument of his own success. His armies also famously conquered Jerusalem, carrying many of its inhabitants into captivity, an event known as the Babylonian exile. And it's really because of this monumental event being recorded in biblical history that Babylon gained a permanent, lasting reputation in Western culture. It became known as both a wildly wealthy, powerful empire and, frankly, the ultimate symbol of human pride and hubris.
Chapter 6. The Fall of Babylon.
But as we know, even the mightiest empires are vulnerable. In 539 BCE, a brand new rival emerged from the east. Now, everyone in the ancient world believed Babylon's massive walls were literally impossible to breach. So the Persian Empire, led by Cyrus the Great, didn't even bother trying to knock them down. Instead, Cyrus used an incredibly creative strategy. The Euphrates River actually flowed right through the center of Babylon. So Cyrus had his forces quietly divert the river's flow upstream. Once the water level dropped, his soldiers simply waded right into the city through the exposed water channels directly under the walls. By bypassing the legendary defenses entirely, Cyrus caused the greatest city on earth to fall with surprisingly little resistance.
Following Cyrus's clever invasion in 539 BCE, Babylon's dramatic life cycle took a rather tragic turn. The Persian Empire simply absorbed the city. It didn't get burned to the ground overnight in some fiery climax. Instead, it suffered a slow, quiet tragedy. While it remained somewhat important for a while, its ultimate political dominance was over. The centers of power shifted to other regions. Gradually, over the following centuries, the great temples deteriorated, the canals dried up, the population shrank, and the city that once ruled empires just slowly faded into history. For a long time, it existed mostly in legends, religious texts, and the tall tales of ancient travelers.
Chapter 7. Rediscovering a Lost City.
Because it disappeared so completely, for the longest time, many people actually doubted the ancient historians' grand descriptions. They treated them like fairy tales. That is, until archaeologists finally took shovels to the sand. When they started digging, the myths became reality. They uncovered the foundations of those massive, supposedly impossible city walls. They found the ruins of grand temples, ancient palaces, and literally thousands of clay tablets bearing cuneiform inscriptions that verified the city's vast administrative and economic reach. They even discovered the physical remains of the spectacular Ishtar Gate. These physical artifacts, many of which have been painstakingly reconstructed and are sitting in museums across the globe today, conclusively prove that the unbelievable legends of Babylon's wealth and scale were absolutely real.
Ultimately, this brings us to the core truth of Babylon, and really the main takeaway from all of this. While the mud bricks and mortar may have crumbled and vanished beneath the Iraqi sands, its immense legacy did not. The concepts they pioneered, written codes of law, incredible scientific and mathematical innovation, and the very blueprint for what a monumental cosmopolitan city can be, continue to shape the foundation of our modern civilization today. The empire didn't last, but the ideas, they absolutely endured.
So, I'll leave you with this thought. If you had a time machine, and you could walk right through those bright blue glazed bricks of the Ishtar Gate and step into ancient Babylon at the absolute height of its power, what do you think would amaze you the most? Would it be staring up at those towering, impenetrable walls? Maybe the sensory overload of the bustling international merchant markets? Or would it be the tantalizing possibility that somewhere nearby, rising out of the desert heat, stood the lush, legendary terraces of the Hanging Gardens? The city itself might be gone, but its mysteries and its monumental legacy are going to keep captivating us for a very long time.